All right, today we're jumping into a text that offers a pretty radical reinterpretation of a story most of us think we know inside and out. It's a narrative it calls the restoration of the original ideal, and you know what? It all kicks off by questioning the very foundations of history. So the text we're digging into today starts with a really provocative question. What if one of the most foundational stories in history is, well, incomplete? And that one question right there totally sets the stage for a completely different way of looking at, well, everything, where we came from and maybe even where we're all headed. Okay, so where does this retelling even begin? Well, according to this text, it's not where you might think. It doesn't start with sin or judgment or any of that. Nope. It starts with something much simpler, a vision it calls God's original dream. What's really interesting is how this text describes that dream. It argues that, it wasn't really about religion in the way we usually picture it, with all the complex rituals and this distant God. It was actually about something way more personal, more relational. The big idea? Creating one single human family all across the globe. And the blueprint for this dream? Super simple, really. A man and a woman start a family. That family grows, generation after generation, and eventually becomes the root for one big unified world. The end goal was this global community all connected by love, with God right there at the heart of it all. But as you can probably guess, a quick look around our world and at our history makes it pretty clear that this original ideal didn't exactly happen, right? Something went wrong. Something went way off course, right from the very start. So the ideal, the dream, was a world of connection and harmony. But what we got, according to this source, was the complete opposite: separation, conflict, fear. And the reason for that shift? It argues it all happened when that very first family lost its connection to God, which sent all of humanity down a totally new and pretty painful path. And we're not talking about just a little mistake here. The text paints this as a major fundamental break. It was like humanity literally stepped onto a different road altogether, a path that was never, ever part of the original design. But here's the thing, the story doesn't just end there in tragedy. Nope. In response to this broken dream, the narrative introduces a whole new phase, a long, incredibly patient plan to rebuild the very foundation that was lost. And honestly, this is the core message of hope in the whole story. The dream was never abandoned. Even after everything went wrong, the commitment to creating that ideal family was still there. And so a massive long-term plan for restoration kicked off. Now, this wasn't some quick fix. Not at all. The source describes this incredibly long, patient process that plays out over all of human history. After that first foundation was lost, God started working through specific people and even whole nations to slowly, piece by piece, get humanity ready for a new beginning, a fresh chance to get that original connection back. And right at the heart of his whole restoration plan, the Messiah. The text points to Jesus but gives him this really specific title, the new Adam. And his whole purpose was to succeed where the first Adam had failed. Okay, and this is where we get to what is probably the most controversial part of this whole text. It offers a really different take on Jesus' mission. And it basically asks, what if he didn't actually finish what he came to do? Yeah, the whole argument really boils down to this one powerful question. Was the crucifixion always the goal? Was that plan A all along? Or was it a tragic plan B, something that only happened because the original plan was blocked? And the text answer is pretty direct. It basically says, look, if God's original dream was to have a perfect family on Earth, then the death of the new Adam just couldn't have been the main goal. It had to be a tragic, secondary outcome. So what's the difference here? Well, the text argues that Jesus' death absolutely accomplished something huge. It opened up the path to spiritual salvation. But that original mission, to create a perfect physical family right here on Earth, that part was left incomplete. And to back this up, the source points to Bible verses like this one, suggesting that Jesus himself knew his work wasn't totally done, that there was more to say, deeper truths that people just weren't ready to hear yet. So what was the missing piece of the puzzle? Well, according to this view, God's ideal was never just about one perfect person. It was always about a perfect pair, a man and a woman together. So to really fulfill that original blueprint, the new Adam needed a new Eve. And that brings us right to the final chapter of this story. how that unfinished mission finally gets completed by fulfilling that original ideal of a perfected man and woman.
This is where a really unique term comes in, one that's central to the whole text: true parents. And the idea is that this title is for the very first couple in all of history to finally actually fulfill the role that Adam and Eve were supposed to. And we're not just talking about symbols here. They're seen as the literal, actual starting point for God's ideal family on earth.
So the text really lays out this clear three-step progression through history. Step 1, the ideal is lost with Adam and Eve. Step 2, the foundation to get it back is laid by the new Adam, Jesus. And then step 3, the ideal is finally completed by a new couple, a new Adam and a new Eve, who are called the true parents. You might be wondering, what about the 2,000 years since Jesus? Well, the text says that the job of preparing the world actually shifted. It fell to the Christian community around the globe. Their mission, throughout history, was to rebuild the foundation so that this complete ideal, the new Adam and new Eve, could finally arrive. And that's really the one thread that runs through this entire story. Despite all the twists and turns and delays in history, this perspective insists that God's core desire, that simple, beautiful dream of one global family, has never, ever changed. And this is where the whole thing just pivots. It takes this entire story out of the history books and drops it right into our laps in the present day. See, the text isn't talking about this fulfillment as some future prophecy. It's presenting it as a reality that is happening right now. So we kind of end up right back where we started, with a big question. This text is making a pretty bold claim that after thousands of years, the time to finally restore God's original ideal is here. And it leaves us with one final thing to chew on. If that's actually true, what would a world built on that fulfilled dream even look like?